Picture this. It's Sunday evening in Austria, and Lewis Hamilton is walking out of the Ferrari motorhome. He isn't smiling, he isn't dodging any questions, and he is absolutely 100% not giving the usual PR-approved answers. Right then and there, the entire narrative around the 2026 Formula One season experienced a massive seismic shift. In this explainer, we're going to dive into that shockingly honest breakdown of Ferrari's 2026 car troubles. We really need to contrast those dreamy, hopeful illusions of Ferrari's preseason with the harsh, waking nightmare that Hamilton just exposed on live television. This right here is probably the most brutally honest assessment we've heard from Lewis Hamilton since he signed that Ferrari contract. He essentially looked straight into the camera and completely shattered the illusion that Austria was just a fluke or, merely a bad strategy weekend. Going into the post-race analysis, the initial chatter was all about how Ferrari somehow betrayed Hamilton with a strategy disaster. But Hamilton himself completely dismantled that excuse. The car simply rejected the tires. Period.
So the absolutely crucial point to understand here is that this wasn't just one bad stint. It wasn't one bad call from the pit wall. Hamilton revealed that his rear tires dropped off on every single set. Literally every tire Ferrari slapped on that car just fell apart in the intense Austrian heat, which strongly points to a fundamental machine failure rather than human error. But then he dropped a line that should honestly terrify every single Ferrari engineer back in Maranello. He mentioned that coming out of the corners, sure, they have the grunt, but at the end of the straights, their deployment just tails off, while Mercedes just keeps on going.
Okay, let's translate that technical jargon into plain English for a second. Ferrari's highly anticipated new engine, the very one they brought to Austria as their big 2026 power unit upgrade, has a massive deployment problem. The hybrid battery is essentially dying. It's running out of breath right before the end of the straight, exactly when a team like Mercedes is still accelerating. And on a track where top speed is absolutely critical, a deployment deficit isn't just a slight disadvantage, it is an absolute death sentence for your lap time.
Let's move on to Section 1, a team in confusion. You can really see this rapid-fire panic rippling through the admissions from Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur. In his post-race interview, there was zero corporate spin. Vasseur just admitted, step by step, how a known lack of genuine pace caused this catastrophic domino effect of desperate mistakes. He openly confessed that they knew they didn't have the pace to fight with Mercedes and Max Verstappen. So, because of that deficit, they tried to overcompensate. They overpushed the first couple of laps, which forced a change in strategy, which then entirely collapsed. They were desperately trying to make up for a fundamental car deficit that simply couldn't be fixed by strategy alone. And Vasseur actually went a step further, comparing this whole nightmare to Hamilton's victory in Barcelona just 2 weeks prior. He straight up admitted that their recent victory in Spain was an outlier. It was heavily reliant on running in clean air. See, in Barcelona, a perfectly timed virtual safety car and track position allowed them to run about 80% of the race in completely clean air, which basically masked all their underlying issues. In Austria, they didn't have that luxury. The big takeaway for us here, Barcelona was essentially a fluke. Austria is the terrifying true baseline of where this car is actually at. If you thought Vasseur's words were tough, Charles Leclerc's were arguably even more damning. I mean, he started on the front row in P2 and absolutely plummeted to a P8 finish, just sliding around all day with overheating rear tires. It is staggering to realize that a driver for one of the most resource-rich organizations in the entire history of motorsport, a team with decades of data, state-of-the-art wind tunnels, and advanced simulators, is publicly confessing that his own engineers cannot predict how their car will behave. It's like a giant puzzle they can't solve. They genuinely don't know why they are incredibly fast one weekend and a total disaster the next.
All right, Section 2, the man versus the machine.
So, Max Verstappen, who was recovering from a qualifying crash, caught up to Hamilton and went for the inside pass. But Hamilton fought back, taking Verstappen wheel to wheel through these crazy high-speed sweeping corners until he basically ran the Dutchman wide into the gravel. Verstappen immediately demanded a penalty over the radio, but the stewards cleared Hamilton. And when Hamilton was told about Verstappen's complaint, he delivered this legendary one-liner. The car and the strategy might be completely failing him, but his killer instinct and racecraft, they are entirely intact. As he put it, you do not expect to go around the outside of a champion.
But look, as much as we absolutely love those spectacular, wheel-to-wheel heroics that define the true greats of the sport, the inescapable reality is pretty clear. Instincts alone do not win championships. Consistent pace wins championships. You can outthink and outdrive your rivals in a single corner, for sure, but over an entire race distance,
Hamilton simply does not have the machinery to maintain the pace required for a 2026 title fight right now.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the competitor gap. Hamilton himself actually pointed out this devastating contrast to the written media. He flat out doesn't believe his team's next engine upgrade is anywhere close to being ready. That means he's stuck with the supposedly upgraded internal combustion engine and its new Shell co-developed fuel for the foreseeable future, even though it's only delivering marginal gains. Meanwhile, Red Bull just unleashed a massive step forward. They found an estimated 3 to 4 tenths of a second, purely from dropping weight off their car. Guys, that is not a gap that closes naturally over a season. That is a gap that actively runs away from you. Let these numbers sit with you for a moment to truly feel the weight of this crisis. Over in the driver's standings, Antonelli is leading the pack, while Hamilton has slipped down to P3, sitting 46 points behind. And in the constructor's standings, Mercedes holds the top spot, with Ferrari trailing in P2 by a staggering 98 points. Both of these massive championship gaps grew significantly just in Austria alone. If Ferrari cannot immediately fix the fundamental deployment and tire issues that Hamilton called out, these championships are threatening to slip away completely. And this brings us to the looming nightmare of the very next race, the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Now, this is Hamilton's home race. It's a track where he's won a record 9 times, literally more than any driver in history at any single venue. But think about the track characteristics for a second. Silverstone is heavily dominated by long, full-throttle straights and highly demanding high-speed corners. Basically, the exact 2 areas where this Ferrari is failing the absolute hardest right now: power deployment and high-speed tire balance. Oh, and to make matters even worse, it's a sprint weekend. That means there are even more points on the table to potentially bleed out to Mercedes and Red Bull. So, looking through this hazy dream of preseason expectations, straight into the brutal reality of the data and the raw honesty of Ferrari's own drivers, we have to ask a really difficult question. Can the legendary driver somehow overcome this flawed machine next week at his home track? Or is the dream of a 2026 championship already dead in the water?